Welcome to the National College podcast, where we dive into the latest education trends, discuss best practice, and highlight important updates in the education sector. I'm your host, Sophie Campbell-Ford, and today we're going to be talking about all things INSET Day. I'm really excited to be joined today by Dr Brittany Wright, who is a Trust CPD Lead and Education Consultant. Thank you so much, Brittany, for being here with the National College today. Before we start talking, would you be able to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Absolutely, Sophie. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me here today. It's a pleasure to be with you and the team here at the National College. My role is leading professional development across 27 schools. We're a multi-academy trust and we're based across South Yorkshire and the East Midlands. My kind of story into this role, I suppose, began with training as a secondary English teacher. And, you know, my heart is still very much in the classroom, held middle leadership and senior leadership roles in secondary schools, and then also working across primary and secondary schools in multi-academy trusts. I've also been lucky enough to work in teacher training as well, so I've supported the profession in recruiting and training high quality teachers for the next generation. And I also do work in professional development as an education consultant as well on the side. And then alongside that, I've also got experience in educational research. So I undertook 2 master's degrees and then finished a PhD last November. So I am a massive geek.
Well, it's lovely to have you here. I'm surprised you had the time. So thank you ever so much for finding it. So just to start off then, would you be able to explain a little bit about your role as the CPD lead in the trust and how you approach professional development for staff across multiple schools?
Yeah, great question. It's certainly a challenge, and it's a challenge that it's really rewarding to be able to focus on. First of all, I think when you're leading professional development at scale, you need to be able to build systems and processes that enable you to address generic aims and foci, but also can actually zoom in on the granular level of what does that school need now to support professional development and fundamentally to have a positive impact on outcomes of children in that school. So what we do is put together a kind of academic year's professional development offer that all 27 of our schools are able to engage with. And the key emphasis there is on the strategic priorities of those schools. So some of those challenges that they're facing that are kind of national or geographical, we'll focus in on those. It might be about supporting good practice in a particular area of the curriculum, for instance, but we're really aiming for breadth there so that there's choice for our schools as to what they engage with. And then in terms of what that looks like when you are zooming in on the granular level, we have leaders of excellence within our trust who are experts who go through a really rigorous application and interview process and then are trained to share their expertise with other schools. And that might be professional development, or that might be, you know, more one-to-one school improvement work with a particular teacher who might want a little bit of extra support. And so those leaders of excellence are absolutely key to that work that we do when we're supporting schools with the specific challenges that they're facing at that time. So you've got to build it. You need those systems and processes. That's really key. But you've also got to be adaptive and responsive to emerging needs over time. Schools are organic communities full of wonderful people, and they change day to day, term by term. So we have to make sure that we can meet those needs too.
So what is the biggest shift between how we used to run INSET days and how we run them now? And are they still changing?
It's a great question. And I think even looking back at the start of my career, you know, one of the things that my first head teacher would do was a State of the Nation address where it would be, this is what the results were, these are our priorities for the year. And that was always a fantastic way for getting everybody on board and focused on the mission for the year ahead. I'm all about the mission. But I think one of the things that I've really noticed over the last few years is that maybe in the kind of 2000s, early 2010s, there was an emphasis on sort of inspirational leadership and motivational speakers, and there was a real kind of movement towards engaging with motivational speakers beyond education as well, which is great, loads to offer. But I think actually what we can see across schools is more of a focus on educational research and more of a focus on educational expertise as well, and sharing that across schools and across places as well, all around the world, that international expertise as well. And so I think the reason behind getting in an inspirational speaker to motivate your staff, you know, the thought there is about belonging, it's about culture, it's about ensuring that everybody feels supported. But actually, the impact of that long term comes from what you're driving in school. So I think we can do both. You know, I think INSET days can be high quality, rigorous, strategic professional learning opportunities where we do bond and we do join together and we do focus in on what we need to achieve, and we do that in a way that's really fun and actually, ticks off a lot of those boxes that used to be addressed by this kind of bought-in motivational speaker for the day as well. So I think that's a key change that we've experienced.
How fundamental are INSET days to the education sector?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, first of all, from a personal perspective, I love a good INSET day. Who doesn't? Coffee, tea, having a catch-up. But the key focus for me is about impact on children's lives. We don't have a lot of time in schools, fundamentally. INSET days are kind of descended from Baker days, from the Baker Report of 1988. Usually you have 5, sometimes those INSET days are disaggregated so that actually you've got less time together. But an INSET day gives you the opportunity to get your whole staff team together. There are no children on site, There is no formal learning taking place, and that time and space is so valuable and so rare. So the impact of them can be huge, but they have to be used in the right way to be able to really make a difference to the lives and life chances of young people. And I think that's where that focus on professional development is key. It's very easy in schools, and it's also important that we think about statutory compliance and we think about mandated training, safeguarding, and so on and so forth. All of those areas are really important, but we only get one chance to all be together working on these key professional learning aspects. And I think INSET days are a really valuable tool in terms of that piece of the puzzle. How they work in practice, I think it can be really lovely to kind of launch a new initiative. And again, I always refer back to the EEF's implementation cycle and that importance of exploring, first of all, what problems you're trying to solve as a school, and then moving into that prepare phase where you actually are scoping out the expertise and what you need to know in order to be able to launch an implementation process that's going to make the difference in your school. So INSET days are a really important part of that deliver stage. What are we doing? Where are we going? How are we going to do it? And how are we going to share that professional learning with all of our staff team? So they're useful in that respect as well. But again, they can be great for re-implementing or for adapting or for just keeping staff with you on the journey of learning that's really important to your professional community of educators as well.
That's a really, really interesting point there. I think you're almost talking about figuring out what your situation, what your setting needs as a primary element to that plan. So how do you ensure that the content of these INSET days is relevant and addresses the diverse needs of the schools in the trust?
There's so much work that has to be done, first of all, in terms of identifying the right problem to solve. And I think, I've got a research background. I'm really interested in asking good questions, because only through asking good questions can you find out what you need to know in order to be able to drive forward school improvement. So there should always be some kind of scoping work in advance. I don't believe in off-the-peg CPD, this kind of plug and play, we're going to take this approach from this school and we're going to copy and paste it into this other school. Now, I know that different MATs and different schools and different organisations work in different ways. That's my personal rather than professional opinion, and it's important to make that clear. But what that means is that any time you're thinking about delivering professional development in a school, you are focusing on the needs of that school, the context of that school, and also the expertise in that school as well. So to give you an example, I've been doing some school-to-school support recently with a school in Lincolnshire, secondary school, really focused on improving their reading offer for secondary school students. Now, we know nationally there's an increasing challenge around number one, children being able to read at age-related expectation when they enter secondary schools in year 7, but also reading for pleasure. The National Literacy Trust is clear that there is a crisis around reading for pleasure. So this school, approached me and a colleague who leads on our secondary English programmes across our multi-academy trust and said, we want to draw on your expertise, come in, do some QA, do some work with our departments, support us with action planning, but also, will you do an INSET day? And it was such a lovely example of how actually, by doing that work initially and getting a sense of some of the stakeholders, some of the people in the school that were going to be really instrumental to the success of this strategy, not just us as visitors coming in and having a look round and, talking about something we're passionate about, but actually making sure that what we delivered on the day completely fitted that setting. In terms of how you do that, Alex Quigley always talks about the idea of a pre-mortem. In social research, there's a fantastic academic called Audrey Traynor who describes it as an armchair walkthrough. I think it's really important when you're planning any professional development, particularly in INSET, where you've got diverse groups of staff who are all coming together potentially. It's really important that you actually zoom in on what could happen on that day. What's the learning going to be that you're aiming for? And what could go wrong? What misconceptions might people have? And actually, fundamentally, the buy-in is crucial as well. So I always like to think, what is my most disengaged participant sitting in that room going to be thinking? They are under pressure in terms of time. They've got a huge amount of responsibility for leading children's progress and outcomes, safety, well-being. Teachers, school leaders, support staff in schools are always busy, and they always have a huge amount to do. So if I'm going to be spending that time with them, it needs to be valuable for them. So I think preempting some of the misgivings they might have, some of the misconceptions they might have around what their responsibility looks like, or whether or not this relates to them and their practice is key, because you can then pitch it and you can preempt that and make sure that they are clear on what they get from this and how they can have impact in their classroom as a result.
That's actually something I really wanted to move on to talk about next as well, actually. It's about engaging staff members who maybe are less engaged in INSET days. I think it's a really interesting point that you said about making it really clear this is what you will gain from the day. I think that's a really important aspect there. Are there any other tips that you can have for handling situations where staff might be disengaged with INSET days?
It's a great question, and it's really interesting because, we're professionals, colleagues in school are always professional, but you want everybody to kind of come to an INSET day open-hearted and ready to learn. We are learners. One of the things that I love about working in education is that, every adult in a school community is also learning all the time at the same time as the children. And that's special. There is something magical about the fact that we're in these incredible learning environments all the time, and we can flourish as a result of that. We're constantly growing. So when you're working with staff who might be a little bit reticent, maybe it's lack of confidence, maybe it's that feeling that, is this relevant to me? Is this the best use of my time now? And you have to respect that. I think it's really important to get curious about it. So if you've got a big INSET day running, maybe 100 staff all together, I think there's an important element of facilitation that's around circulating, checking in, having a look at what people are doing when they're getting involved in the tasks that you've set up, really listening and really using the same assessment for learning strategies that you use in a classroom with adults, because fundamentally the principles of effective teaching and learning are the same, So I think that is key to effective kind of strategizing to make sure that everybody's engaged. I also think motivation is really important as well. And I'm lucky enough to have co-authored a book a couple of years ago with a fantastic former colleague at the University of Warwick, Professor Des Hewitt. And we looked at engaging motivation, empowering learners in schools. And so, I've got my favourite motivation theorists, as I'm sure you can imagine. But I think it's really important that we actually bring people on the journey with us when we're thinking about this. So the rationale. Why are we focusing on this for our INSET day? What is the point? People deserve to know that. We can't just assume that everybody's on the same wavelength as us and has that same sense of what's important and what's at stake. So making that clear from the outset is really important. On that note, senior leaders in schools, when they are working with external experts and bringing them in for those CPD sessions, it's really good practice to make that pitch to your staff first of all, to make the case as to why you've got this external expert coming in, and to also value it by being present and taking part in that CPD session as well. I think that's fundamental to the success of any kind of INSET day when you're brokering in that external support. And then I also think there's an argument that we need to really plan for learning of adults. We can't be up there regurgitating an education endowment foundation report and going, here's 11 key concepts that you need to apply in your classroom tomorrow. That's not realistic. That's not how we'd plan learning for the young people that we teach in our schools. So actually structuring those CPD sessions so that staff get the maximum out of them. They get the opportunity to learn something new, to apply that and to rehearse that and to think about what that could look like in their classroom environment. They get the opportunity to collaborate with colleagues. Now in a secondary school, that might be in subject-specific departments or based on, your work stream or area of support. In a primary school, that might be subject-focused or year group focused. There's so many different things we can do when we have that time and space to work together. So I think really focusing on learning is absolutely paramount.
I think focusing on learning, that's a really fantastic point to make there. So moving on to something slightly different. So many trusts at the moment have been exploring hybrid models of inset days. As a member of the National College, what are the key benefits for incorporating online platforms into your CPD strategy?
Great question. And I think, there are so many benefits to online, virtual forms of professional development. I think it's really important to draw that distinction between synchronous online CPD, where we're all together learning live, and that asynchronous on-demand CPD that we can access at any point. One of the benefits of the National College for us as a trust has been that people can engage with those areas of interest that they have that are professional areas of interest, but also might be, personally driven. So one of the things that I like about working with the National College is that we've got teaching assistants across our trust who will often say to me, "Oh, Brittany, I love the National College because if I'm interested in something, an area of need linked to a child, I don't have to ask if I can book onto this course and get cover. I can just go and I can watch that module and I can do that learning in my own time. And I can do that at, any hour of the day that works around me." That flexibility is really, really useful. And so I think that's one of those key benefits of the asynchronous kind of online professional development. For trusts working across geographical distances, obviously getting together online live can be really, really powerful. And that goes for professional development, but also opportunities to collaborate with other schools within the trust as well. Our Sheffield and Worksop hub schools recently had a fantastic cultural day where they actually had a live lesson beamed out to them from our Sheffield secondary school into the primary school. So all the year 5 and 6 children were able to access a live lesson taught by a teacher at the local secondary school. And that's a lovely example of some of the affordances of those hybrid models where you get to meet people that might work really far away from you, and you actually get to build that sense of community and belonging across an organisation through some of those online means. I think it's always useful to have a balance, and part of what I do when I'm constructing our CPD offer is make sure that we've got some online, some twilights, some in the school day, but also some of those face-to-face opportunities. But you've got to be really clear on why, what's the learning and what modality in terms of online learning, whether it's asynchronous, synchronous or face-to-face, is going to be most appropriate in order for you to achieve those learning aims. And I do think there's something magical about CPD that takes place in schools where you get to visit classrooms. There's something about that learning in practice that you are really tangibly able to apply when you go back to your setting as well. And you're able to just reflect and learn from the way that different systems and processes work in different schools with different people as well. So I think a balanced approach is always crucial and really focusing on what you're trying to achieve as well.
Fantastic. Are you able to share an example of how combining in-person and online training has made a noticeable impact on staff development in your trust?
Great question. I think an example that goes beyond the trust might be most useful. So we have a teaching school hub within our Academy Trust, Lead Teaching School Hub, which serves Lincolnshire schools. And we deliver the MPQs with our current partner, Teacher Development Trust. A key aspect of their approach to MPQ delivery is that hybrid model. So participants come along to a face-to-face day, first of all, at the Teaching School Hub in Lincoln. They have that opportunity to get to know each other, to build that feel of community. And I think that's really key, particularly for facilitators as well. Getting to know the people that you're serving in terms of professional development is so important. And then we follow that up with regular online sessions afterwards. And it's really lovely to see how you can build community online as well as face-to-face, but actually the benefits of connecting the two are really useful. And again, it comes down to purpose. So the face-to-face initially is about getting to know each other, getting to know the course, getting some really high-quality professional development where you're applying theory to practice and you're sharing those reflections and you're thinking really deeply together. But then following that up with that regular support, that touch base point, that opportunity to actually collaborate and to work together online in a different way, much more structured, often in pairs. So there's always a coaching session at the end that's very much you and someone you've already met working together to reflect on your progress so far across the course. So it's one of those things where the benefits there for participants come from that blended approach. They're not having to get cover and come out of school as much. They are able to access high quality professional development. Effectively, they get the best of both worlds. And I think that's really crucial too, making sure that what we're asking of schools when we're putting together a professional development programme is realistic, because, you know, the best form of professional learning might take one shape, but actually is that practical and feasible for schools to access, you know, in the context that they serve. So we've always got to be mindful of that.
That's such a good point. It's so important to remember the different needs, the different contexts. And in a trust, I imagine your role, that's magnified because you do have those 27 different settings to be thinking about. So with your experience, it'd be great to talk now about maybe some practical tips that we can share with our schools for preparing and implementing their INSET days. So one question that I always like to ask our school leaders is, what is one thing that you'd like schools to try in their upcoming INSET days that they might not have tried before?
I think for anyone planning INSET days, whether that's on a school level, on a trust-wide level, you know, working together with your local partners and local schools with a particular focus, I guess one of the things that might be interesting to try is to spend some time reflecting on the orthodoxies of what we do day to day. And I'm going big there, I'm going bold. But often in schools, we're so busy that we don't take the time to step back and reflect on the things that we do day to day. So actually, building some time into an INSET day where you really kind of put some of these practices under the microscope to think about the implications of them could be really useful. Not in a, you know, kind of anarchic, throw the baby out with the bathwater, you know, off we go, we're going to do something really radical. But actually just reflecting, is what we do effective? What is the aim of what we do? And really breaking that down. So, you know, a good example would be tutor time in secondary schools. What is it being used for? Is it literally just an opportunity for the teacher to take the register in order for us to know that the children are safe and that they're on site? If that's the case, what else could we be using that time for? Is it serving a purpose? What purpose do we want it to serve? Do we want it to be key to our personal development opportunities for young people? Do we want it to be a time when we actually prioritise reading and reading fluency and the opportunity to share a great book with people that you like in your tutor group? So just stepping back from some of those things that we do day to day and giving yourself time to go, why? Why do we do it like that? Just because we've always done it like that, or because this is the best way to do it, can be, you know, a really useful new strategy to try that maybe we don't do. And I think also getting the balance right between mandatory training, you know, that all important kind of compliance piece, and actually seizing the day with this opportunity to have all staff together in one space. You know, what can we do with that? How can we redress that balance? Can we use, you know, some asynchronous national college content to support us with some of that compliance training, so that actually we've got the time together to focus on those really important questions that are going to drive forward children's learning and our learning as well as educators.
Taking a step back and asking why. I think that's an absolutely fantastic thing to continually do, just to make sure that you're meeting the ever-changing needs of a school, of a setting, of teachers, most importantly, of students and pupils. In your mind then, what do you think the future of INSET days look like? How do you see CPD evolving, particularly with the role of technology and platforms like the National College?
A great example would be our trust approach to subject leadership CPD. So we've restructured that this year. And basically we've devised a subject leadership programme where we all come together as subject leaders of different subjects, and we focus in on a particular area. So in the autumn term of 2024 to 2025, we looked at signature pedagogies and the research around that, and I led a keynote session. And then subject-specific facilitators picked that up in a follow-on session and applied that to their individual subjects. Again, an opportunity to collaborate with other subject experts, but also that opportunity to all be coherently thinking about some of the same research at the same time, so that you've got these conversations going on in schools where your maths lead has been thinking about the same educational theory as your languages lead and your science lead and your English lead and so on. Next term, we've got some external experts supporting us with that. So we've got Dr Nick Crossley from Liberty Academies Trust is going to be delivering a keynote session with Des Hewitt. from the University of Warwick, focusing on inclusive pedagogy and inclusive curriculum design. That's fantastic for subject leads. We can all be together for that expert input. It will be online. There's no travel time. We benefit from that expertise. And then in that follow-on session later in the term, it will be subject-specific groups again, where colleagues get that chance to get together and apply some of these principles to their specific responsibilities in school and drive forward learning again. The fantastic aspect of that is that the priorities that we've scoped across the Trust to inform the planning of the programme came from our regional directors, who are regularly visiting schools, conducting quality assurance visits, supporting our leaders and teachers and teaching assistants with some of those questions about what next, how do we move forward. And so actually the strategic priorities are being addressed through those sessions as well. And that's really nice, because it means that as a trust we can have conversations beyond our individual school, but also together as a wider community as well.
If a trust is hesitant to adopt hybrid or online training models, what advice would you offer to help them see potential benefits?
It's a great question, and there are reasons to be hesitant. And I think the perception from staff is really important. We've got to be really careful that we don't present online training and face-to-face training as the same, because they have different advantages and disadvantages. So we've got to be really clear about that. I think it's also crucial that people develop the confidence in order to be able to implement an online or hybrid training strategy effectively. You know, confidence with online tools, whether you're using, Microsoft Teams or Zoom or the National College platform, people need training to support that, whether they're facilitating that CPD or administrating that professional development too. So I think that's really key as well. You need an implementation strategy. You've also got to ask yourself, why are you doing this? Are you doing it because, you've got these long travel times if you want to get together as, trust colleagues or as partners across a particular area? Is it because you want, more time spent focusing on professional learning and you feel like online is going to give you the platform to be able to do that? So being really clear about what it is you're trying to achieve, making sure that you've trained staff and that you've supported them to be able to find the right tool in order to address those aims, and then fundamentally having a go, being brave, and getting to grips with what you can do with this technology. The interesting thing is that it's changing all the time. We all learnt so much about online teaching during the pandemic. School closures, or partial school closures I should say, put that real pressure on staff to upskill quickly. Personally, I really enjoyed it. It's a learning opportunity. And when you've got students who really need high quality learning, thinking about the ways that you can do that through technology, it's just fantastic. It's really inspiring to be able to apply your skill set to a different area of practice. And I think you can really drive forward improvements through doing that. The fundamental thing that I would advise is that you don't see it as just this dissemination model of telling people information. We're on Zoom, so all I can do is a PowerPoint and flick through. There are so many other ways of being able to assess learning, being able to activate prior knowledge, being able to give colleagues the opportunity for independent practice, whether you're using scenario tasks or you're, giving them the opportunity to actually plan collaboratively together. People talk a lot about kind of breakout room fatigue, and I think that's really interesting because I understand why that would be the case. But actually, if you structure a task and it's deliberately designed to elicit high quality professional conversation and dialogue, you're not going to get quiet breakout rooms. It's about making sure that you are using the online tools in the right way to achieve the aims that you want to.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And now just to wrap up, what would you say is the biggest takeaway for educators and leaders about the value of INSET days in CPD?
Again, time is always precious in schools. It's that opportunity to get together. What can you do with that? What incredible transformations can you lead on through really seizing the opportunity to get everybody together in one space at one time and just doing something absolutely wonderful that's going to make the difference for the children and young people that you serve.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. If you found this podcast useful, be sure to check out the National College platform, where you can find other trending podcasts, blogs, webinars and courses, ensuring that you stay up to date with all of the developments in the education sector. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much again, Brittany, for joining us.
You're very welcome.